welcome to ImageMaker Inc. Media. I'm Joyce Knutson. Today on the phone we are talking to Gregg Gregory, who is an experienced certified speaking professional specializing in the development of teams. Welcome to the show, Gregg.
And thank you, Dr. Joyce. It's great to be here with you today.
It's my pleasure. Gregg, I did a lot of reading about all of your successes. May I begin with congratulating you for your accomplishments?
Well, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. I know how hard it is to achieve. For those who do not know what a certified speaking professional is, can you please explain?
It is the level of platform excellence, and it's conferred by the National Speakers Association out of Tempe, Arizona. And it's about platform skills, it's about business models, it's a level of experience to a vast number of clients. And right now, I believe we're at just a little over 600, not quite 700 folks in the world that have the Certified Speaking or CSP designation.
Well, that's great.
And it is also, I'll add this to it, it's the only designation that is an earned designation. So it's the highest earned designation conferred by the NSA.
Okay, so now our audience knows that, so we can go on. Did someone or something inspire you to go this far in life? Was it someone from your family or someone you knew from your profession?
Well, that's an easy answer I could cover with one word, yes. There's not really one person ever in my mind that inspires us to do everything in life. Obviously, our family is the biggest part. You read about Kevin Durant and how his mom inspired him, and I just heard that story about Mother's Day, and that's just been so powerful for me. But it's also about one gentleman in my life early on that kind of got me going, and it was a gentleman named Frank Tracy. And Mr. Tracy was, believe it or not, my high school principal. Now, the high school I went to had we had about 700 kids in my graduating class. And Mr. Tracy came in my junior year. So it was the spring or the fall of 1973 when Mr. Tracy got the whole student body together and just kind of said, I want to introduce myself. And I was just magnified by how his presence was on the stage. And he said something that day. He said, I'm going to share with you the secret to success. It's 10 little words. And it's not just these 10 words, but it's these 10 words in this order. And when he shared those words, it was kind of interesting. The whole student body sitting in the gymnasium said, yeah, whatever. And I don't know whether I remember those words from that day or not. Quite frankly, you got to understand, I was a junior, I was a boy, I'm in high school, in the gymnasium, in the middle of the day. So the odds that I was even paying attention are pretty slim. But we got to mock those 10 little words over the years. And at the graduation for the class of 74, he said the same speech.
Really?
In the fall of 74, he got everybody in the gym again, gave the same speech. At my graduation, June the 16th, 1975, at Cole Field House on the University of Maryland's campus, at that graduation, he said the same speech. And for 15 years, Frank Tracy gave that exact same speech twice a year, if not more. So as students heard those words, we mocked them. So it really didn't mean much in high school. Let's face it, when we're in high school, we know everything.
Absolutely.
So it was about 15 years. No, obviously we don't, but yeah. We think we do.
Yes.
So it's about 15, I don't know, maybe 20 years later, I realized I was living those 10 little words. See, in my professional life, I've never had a job that paid me a salary in which I was living on. Now, I received a small stipend in sales, but the bulk of the income came from commissions. Or in the mortgage business I was in for many years, it was 100% commission. And for the last 15, 16 years, it's been this business here, been my own business, so let's face it, there's no salary per se there. And so I realized those 10 little words meant a lot. Recently, Mr. Tracy passed away.
Oh.
And I went to the funeral home. And I got to tell you, it was the most inspiring viewing I've ever been to.
Wow.
There were 250 folks there from all the years that he graduated, plus a lot of the teachers who came back. And teachers were telling me he was the best people leader they ever worked for in their lives. So he inspired people. Yeah, he inspired people immensely. And as I look back over those words, I can basically take every success and every failure in my life and attribute it to those 10 little words. And they're
what an amazing story, really. You don't remember the 10 words, right?
Oh, of course I do.
Okay, may we hear them?
10 words. Each word has just one syllable.
Okay.
Each word has just 2 letters.
Okay.
If it is to be, it is up to me.
Okay, that's great. Well, we know that's true.
Absolutely. It's not up to your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, your aunts, your uncles, your cousins.
Right.
It's not up to your boss. It's not up to your company. It's not up to anybody else. It's up to you. And I use that because people say, well, you teach teamwork. How does it apply there? Well, if I'm going to be part of a team, it's up to me, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And so Mr. Tracy inspired me with those words, and it's one of the most popular articles on my website today.
Well, that's great. That's how teachers or principals or anyone in the educational field should be. And I know that this is very amazing to me because I also had a high school principal say something to me that changed my life. So it probably happens more than you think.
Oh, absolutely. And the sad part is when I was at the funeral home talking to some of the teachers and telling them how much of an impact they had on my life, they looked at me and were just, one of them gave me a hug and said, thank you. He says, we never get to hear this because once you graduate, you go on. And so the fact that I was able to share that back with them really made them feel great. And what's really fun, and I went back to my high school and actually delivered that speech to the high school to a group of about 300 students. And Mr. Tracy was actually supposed to come to the school. This was a couple of years ago. And unfortunately, he wasn't feeling well that night, so he never got to come. But when I delivered that speech, I felt his presence with me the whole time I'm speaking on the stage to students and their parents about the 10 little words. And it just inspired those kids that were in the room, and that just made me feel so much better.
That's just great, Greg. I really like that story. I'm sure that our listeners will, too. I know it takes a lot of work and determination to achieve so much success. How do you feel you got to where you are today?
Again, in a simple word, it's persistence. I'm often drawn to the story of Thomas Edison when he's asked, how many times did you fail when you went to invent the light bulb? He said, I never failed. I just found another way it didn't work. Well,
it's always attitude.
Yeah, it is, because the great Vince Lombardi said, it's not whether you get knocked down, it's whether you get back up.
Right, absolutely.
And my tagline here, my quote is, it's not whether you get knocked down, it's whether you get back up and how fast you get up. Because I believe we have to be able to bounce back in the midst of failures.
Well, if I would have listened to naysayers, I wouldn't be on the phone with you right now because I was told I was uneducable, sort of like Les Brown's story. So
oh, yeah.
You can't, just because you have a condition that there could be nothing done about it, you say, well, next I'll figure out another way. And that's what you have to do. That's persistence.
And it goes back to the great W. Mitchell. If nobody's familiar with him, he was in a motorcycle accident and then burned badly over his body. Then he was in an airplane crash and paralyzed. And he's been around the world speaking, and his philosophy is it's not what happens to you, it's what you do about it.
Absolutely.
And so I've inspired, those people are the ones who inspire me the most over the years. And, you know, we get knocked down, so we have to get up, and it's the people that we surround ourselves with.
That's true. Well, I know that Charles Krauthammer, I think that's the way you say his name, was paralyzed in a swimming accident, and he's on television all the time. About his beliefs. Whether you believe what he believes or not doesn't matter. Look at this man. Look what he's done. He only could talk from the head, you know, with his brain. So he took his brain, the one thing he did have, and he used it.
Absolutely.
So it's amazing how some people could get up and some people can't.
It's what you focus on.
That's true.
If you focus on what you can't do, you won't. If you focus on what you can do, you will.
That's true. Well, it is very interesting that you are an only child and you work by yourself, and yet you speak on teamwork. How did that come about?
Well, the phrase of that is interesting the way you say it, because it's exactly what my wife says. When somebody asks my wife, what does Gregg do? She says, he helps companies build teamwork. And then she laughs. She says, he's an only child and he teaches teamwork. Go figure. And it's interesting because a lot of my keynote speeches, when I start off throwing a baseball up in the air and catching it, 5 or 6 times. And I look at the audience and say, are you bored? And
I don't think so.
Well, no, they are, because they're sitting there going, what's he doing, just throwing a baseball up in the air and catching it? Well, as an only child, my dad worked very hard. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, and she did her best to help me, but, when it came to certain things like baseball, I even say she threw like a girl. But she tried, and she was out there. But I had to.
You did what you do. When you're an only child, and I'm not. I have 7 brothers and sisters, so I don't know what an only child is like. But I know in only children that they do figure out ways to have things that they do, rituals, whatever they have to do to have a friend.
Right. And as it comes into teamwork, I had to go build my teams very early. There were people in my neighborhood that I chose to play with, and I learned to evaluate people and who I would invite onto my team.
Sure.
And so I learned how to do that. I learned how to read people. I learned how to work with people. I learned how to share. I learned how to give. And a lot of that's values that were instilled from my folks. It's also the things that I started to learn about my people. And so I began to work like that and build a team. If I needed to play with somebody, I'd go build a team. And that's exactly kind of how it started in the early days, is I had to choose my team. Because you can't choose your brothers and sisters, let's face it.
Right, and sometimes it's better to choose. Because someone is a family member, a brother, a sister, a cousin, doesn't mean that because blood got them there that you respect them, you want to work with them, any of that stuff.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So as a leader in your profession, how do you define an effective team? Is there a certain size? Describe for our listeners what an effective team might look like.
It's interesting. To define team, let me also define the difference between teamwork and collaboration. Teamwork is when a smaller group of people are working together. And collaboration is when Team A and Team B inside of a company, inside of a group, inside of any organization have to work together. So Team A has to collaborate with B. So when you look at, say, professional sports teams, I a lot of times will ask how many people are on, a professional football team. And people will always pop up and say 53 or 54. And I say, really? I said, what about the practice squad? What about the coaches? What about the sales staff? What about the administration staff? And they go, oh. I said, all that's part of an organization. I said, then the active players on a team, then you've got your offensive team, your defensive team, you've got your special units team. Then inside the offensive team, you've got your offensive line team, you've got your, and they go, oh. So I define a team as it breaks out like this. It's a small group, okay? And they've got to trust, support, and respect each other. So an effective team starts off as a small group. When I say small, I'm usually talking under 20 to be really effective. Now, you can have multiple teams, and when I talk to leaders a lot of times, I've had some leaders have 50 people as direct reports. That's crazy. I mean, it's difficult. So it's a small group who trust, support, respect each other. And then I use a word called harmonizing skills. Now, I like harmonizing because I also happen to love music. And when you take music and you put in harmonies, the sound is so much fuller, so much stronger, such much more effective than just a solo. Whether it's harmonizing voices or harmonizing instruments, whatever that is, it's harmonizing. So I tell people harmonizing, or you can even use complementary skills. But they also have to be committed to a unified mission. Whatever it is they're doing, they've got to be committed to it. They've also got to pursue the mission or objectives on an agreed-upon course. There's nothing worse than having an idea how you want to, the ultimate goal, but want to get there in multiple different ways. That's the problem we have right now in the United States Congress. They may want to balance the budget, but they all want to get there in a different way, and that's what's causing problems.
Communication always is the cause of problems.
Absolutely.
Or lack of thereof.
Oh, absolutely. And then the last thing that I put into my definition is there must be membership accountability.
Yeah.
Meaning each team member must hold their other respective team members accountable. Here's the challenge with that. If the leadership is not holding the people accountable, the likelihood that the members will hold each other accountable is nil or none.
You know, that's so true, Greg, because I worked with, I'm not going to mention the name of the group, a very large group here in Nashville, and I found that to be true when I went in and did assessments where there was no accountability by the leader. And so the right hand really didn't know what the left hand was doing.
Absolutely.
It was so frustrating to see that because you envy these people. They're your team, and you find out that there's just leadership. Just because you're a CEO after your name or you have a doctor in front of your name, it doesn't really matter. What matters is how you do your job.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things. A few weeks ago, I had the privilege to be in the audience and hear Patrick Lencioni speak. Now, for those of our listeners, your listeners who are not familiar, Patrick Lencioni wrote the book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And one of the things he talks about is accountability. And I had the chance to ask him afterwards personally, what do you do in that situation when a leader is not holding him accountable? I had my thoughts, but I wanted to hear what his thoughts were. And I'm happy to say his thoughts and my thoughts are pretty much the same. Is if the leader's not holding someone accountable, then the person, for example, if you were my boss and you weren't holding me accountable to something, I know that I need to be held accountable, so I would come to you and say, Dr. Joyce, this is what I need, and I'm looking for you to hold me accountable to get this done. So I'm actually...
Isn't it a shame you have to ask the team leader that question?
It is. It's one of the reasons leaders fail is because they avoid confrontation, and when they're trying to hold accountable, they're viewing that as a confrontation.
Or a conflict, and they don't
Exactly. Exactly. Now, if we understand the 5 dysfunctions and we've got the effective team, guess what? You're going to get rid of most of that by the time you get to the accountability phase.
Yeah, that's true. Well, you mentioned the term team matriculation. What does that mean, and do teams sometimes slide backwards in the process?
Oh, absolutely. The team matriculation process is really nothing new. The concept has been out around since the 1960s. And it's the 4 processes that we go through. So a team has to, and many of your listeners I'm sure have heard this, yet I'm amazed at how often I work with an executive team of CEOs, CIOs, the C-suite, and they've never heard these words. So the words are forming, storming, norming, and performing.
That's my favorite thing. Do you know that? That's my favorite thing.
Absolutely.
People, if they understand those 4 things, it would help them so much. So I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yeah, the fun part is it doesn't matter whether we're talking about a church choir team, a Little League sports team, a board of directors team, or a manufacturing plant team. That's absolutely irrelevant because every team goes through it. So there's the forming process where people get together and ask questions. At that point, they also need to have ground rules established. So once they get through that, then there's the storming. It's where they start to not ask questions but make demands. Then there are also subgroups develop. And I find this fascinating because when the subgroups develop, they start to fight and they start to argue. And what are they arguing about? Trivial stuff that doesn't mean a thing. I find that fascinating that we go through that process.
It is fascinating.
Then the norming phase is where people agree to disagree, values and norms become set. And then performing is rewarding and fun. In my workshops, I'll often ask, how many have ever worked on a team that, clicked like that all the time? And somebody raises their hand, And I had a gentleman one time, I said, how often did you see your team leader? He said, once a quarter. I said, really? He said, yeah, we didn't need to see him. No, it was great because they had that much trust in him.
That was wonderful that he earned that. He must have earned that.
Absolutely. So I said, you saw him after. I said, how much work did you have to do? He said, oh, my God, we were slammed almost 2 out of every 4 weeks of a month. He said, we were just slammed. I said, how much stress was there? I said, on a 1 to 10 scale. He said, we hovered around a 9 as far as stress goes. I said, so let me get this right. You didn't really see your boss. You were doing a lot more work than some of the other teams. Your stress level was high. And yet you say the team was performing? He goes, absolutely. I said, so let me ask you this question. On a 1 to 10 scale, how much fun did you have? He said a 12.
Well?
Because they understood where they were.
Yes, that's great. That's something that our audience would benefit so much from. Those 4, I live by those 4 things because so many times you don't get to the performing.
No. Now, here's the thing is, you asked the question, do teams slide backwards? And the answer is yes. There could be little changes that can have them slide back, 1 slide. There are 3 things that could occur to any team, regardless of where they are, that would send them all the way back to forming. Okay? They're a change in leader. You have a change in leader, you're going back to the beginning. You have a significant change in people on the team or a significant change in direction that the team is going. Any of those would send you all the way back. So we've got to be cognizant. And I like to tell folks this, if you're taking any notes here, if you take the forming and storming phase and bracket that and put a letter I, and then you take the norming and performing and bracket those and put the letters W-E or we.
Right.
Listen to the language of the people. In the forming, storming stage, they'll talk about I's and me's. In the norming, performing stage, they'll talk about we's and us's. And that's the language you want to start to listen for. Listen to
3 more.
Yeah, listen to the language that sports players do when they're doing an interview. If after the game they're talking about a lot of I, problem. If they're talking we, it's fascinating.
Yes. It definitely is one of my favorites, as I mentioned before, because you can actually identify what you need to do or what needs to be done or who needs to go. And I love that, so thanks for bringing that up. I know that probably any business can improve through teamwork if there's more than one person. Besides, like, I work for myself, and it's me, myself, and I. But what areas of business do you feel would improve through teamwork?
Again, like you, I work by myself, and I tell folks there are 3 people in my company, me, myself, and I.
Me too.
And there are sometimes that we get into some pretty heavy discussions, and the conflict is there. And there's no doubt we have that issue. But I get the bottom line of it at the end of the day, it really is one person. Yes. Yet I have a board of advisors. I've got
That's great.
4 or 5 people that I bounce things off of. I have a virtual assistant that I value more than just about anything. If I've got a question, does this make sense, I'll bounce it off of him. But I've got 3 or 4 other board of advisors, a CEO of a computer networking company on my board of advisors. I've got other colleagues in the profession of speaking that are my colleagues. One of my mentors, the great Willie Jolly, is one of my advisors. So I bounce things off of them and use them in that aspect. And that's where teamwork starts to help me. For organizations, though, it really is everywhere because it's the one element in an organization that's not measured. Really, organizations don't really measure it. If you talk to CEOs, if you break the business down into strategy and things that need to be done, and then you break things down into the emotional or the people side, a CEO will tell you that whether regardless of where they are in the organization, about 95% of that works systematically. They've got their systems, they've got their processes, they've got everything in place, they know what's got to get done. If you ask a CEO what keeps him or her awake at night, it's the health of the organization or the people.
Absolutely. That's the intrinsic part of having the teamwork work.
It's that part of it.
Systems. It isn't just systems. It's people.
Well, I had a privilege to meet, and I've spoken with he's now chairman of the board of a situation with Marriott Organization, Bill Marriott. And I've had a chance to talk with him a couple of times. And one time in particular, he had flown from Washington, D.C. to New York to speak at a conference that I was attending. And that morning he left Washington, D.C. at about 6 a.m., took the corporate plane to New York. He wasn't due to be at our event until about 11:30. He went and visited 3 hotels, came to the Marriott Marquis in Manhattan, Times Square, spoke at our convention there for a main stage event, and then did a concurrent session. Afterwards, he visited 3 more properties in New York, flew home, and was home by about 6:30 that evening. Now, that's a lot for anybody.
That's what I would call a productive day.
And what's interesting, I said, Mr. Marriott, why do you find it important? And his words were so powerful. He said, how do you think I can get the pulse of what goes on in our organization if I'm not willing to go out and talk and shake hands with our associates?
Certainly, you have to do that.
You've got to.
What a brilliant man. That's why his name is Marriott.
And that's exactly what it is. It's about the value of that. So a lot of what I teach are the values that come out of the Marriott and how they run their business. And they work in a team environment. They go through their huddle meetings. They have their basics concepts. They work that. And that's what's so powerful.
Well, I think of Google when you talk about that, where they have sitting and they have running tracks and places you can lay down. I mean, that's what we need in businesses today. We need to give people a balanced work day. And I just don't see it. Do you?
Oh, no, you're spot on. And the problem we've got is so many of us individually don't do it for ourselves because we feel we have to continue to do that.
Yeah.
So there are 5 companies that when I do a workshop, I say, what do these companies have in common? And the first one is Marriott, then there's Nordstrom's, then there's Southwest Airlines, there's Disney World, and then there's Google. And those 5 huge organizations really value their people. Southwest Airlines even says our number one customer is not our customer. Our number one customer is our employee. If we as leaders take care of our employees will take care of the customers. Now, regionally, there's lots of other organizations. For our listeners, your listeners on the West Coast, you've got In-N-Out Burger. They do a tremendous job with valuing their employees. If you've ever been to a restaurant, the very first one in the United States, by the way, was in your town there in Nashville called Houston's.
Oh, it's a wonderful restaurant.
Absolutely. It's all owned by one family. And that family, the Hillstone Group, really is conscientious about taking care of their folks. When there's a problem, when there's an issue, they really stick together and they value their people. They've got some servers who've worked for them for over 20 years.
Yes, they do.
And by the way, some of those servers have master's degrees, but they enjoy the work they're doing and the way they're valued so much more.
People like appreciation, and I think such a simple thing. It doesn't cost anything to go to an employee and say, you're doing a great job today. We're so glad we have you in our family.
Oh, absolutely. Now, here's the challenge with that. It's so simple. It's so simple.
Yeah.
The challenge is not everybody likes appreciation in the same way. Recently, I listened to your broadcast where you had Dr. Tony Alessandra.
Yes.
And Dr. Tony is just phenomenal. And he talked about the DISC process. Well, you see, the D, DISC, the dominance folks want to be recognized in one way, where the S folks want to be recognized in a different way. So the way we show our appreciation and say thanks has to vary depending upon the style of the person.
And if people don't know the style of the person, how are they going to know how to show it in a different way?
Have you ever put a jigsaw puzzle together?
Absolutely.
Okay, where do you start?
Oh, boy.
What do you start to do first?
I first look and see what I know and do that one first.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I put the answer I think that I know first, so then I can work around that.
Right. Okay, so you find something that's familiar. For me, what's familiar is straight edge pieces.
Okay.
So I start with the border.
So there's the explanation of the DISC.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So do we need to go into the companies and teach them DISC? Is that what would be a good idea, so they know how?
It is the ultimate foundation in everything. In Patrick Lencioni's book, He even talks about the everything disc model, about how powerful it is, how the folks need to have the clear understanding of behaviors. Once they understand the behaviors, then we can understand why people do things. When I, as a leader, understand why they do it, then I can help build. Now, let's be clear about this. There are some people, let's face it, we've got hackers in this world who want to send out viruses and hack our computers and everything. So there are bad people in this world, and that will never change. One of my clients years ago brought me in to help try and fix a problem because they had somebody else come in and give them a behaviorist profile, but they never taught them how to use it. So
it's of no use.
Absolutely. So, Dr. Joyce, if I know by looking at this report what it is about you that motivates you,
yes,
does that mean I also know what might tick you off?
That's right. You do. I'm a certified disc trainer myself, so I know what you're talking about. But many people that are listening don't.
Right.
So as much as we can talk about it and help the listeners to know, that would be very helpful for this interview.
Right. And the challenge is so many folks just take a profile and hand it to them. Well, there's an old expression that says knowledge is power. Well, I could not disagree with that more. It's the application of the knowledge.
I agree.
So I tried to go in with these folks, but this organization had people who were so bent on trying to destroy the other people because they didn't like them that the company started to implode. And they had a major shakeup about a year later. I mean, major. They had to lay off hundreds of people because their business was starting to collapse. And that's a problem because we start to change the culture.
Right. Well,
we change the culture.
This is wonderful information because most people don't know about it, I don't think. How does teamwork, good or bad, impact the business community?
The easiest way to look at that is from the CEO on down. We all have one boss.
Yes.
And that's
my own boss, and so are you.
But no. Well, there is that, but there's also, in a for-profit company, we all have one boss, and it's the customer.
Yes.
The great Sam Walton said they could fire everybody from the CEO on down by taking their business somewhere else.
Right.
So,
if I can find it, I'm going to send you something that I had when I did seminars, used it, and it is phenomenal about who's the boss. Did you ever see the Who's the Boss? There's a Who's the Boss.
I know the TV show with Tony Danza and Judith Light.
But there is a Who's the Boss thing. It's fantastic because it's the customer.
Absolutely.
And if I can find it, it's going to be hard, but I will try to find it just for myself to keep looking at it.
Well,
but it's really the customer, and if
absolutely.
you realize that, there are some places that they seem to have the whole thing, like maybe Google. It's really hard to compete with somebody like that. But a customer, it really wants to be
customer's king,
appreciated and heard and all of that.
But it goes beyond that, because when you do that right, and you've got the team that's doing that,
right.
Not just one person. I think we've all experienced really good service at a place and really bad service possibly at the same place.
Right.
So it's the people. So yes, it's when we get those people to work together to present that image.
We have to be consistent. It's
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I tease folks all around the country, and I say, imagine that you're slammed at work, but you've got to make a personal phone call to the Department of Motor Vehicles, and everybody goes, oh, because they cringe. Or I say, you have to call your help desk for computer IT issues. And somebody in the program almost inevitably will say, you mean call my helpless desk? Because they have that image.
They do, and they have kind of earned that image because, for example, every time you call the telephone company or the phone for, let's say, your cell phone company, the phone for 2 hours.
Absolutely.
And they have to put you on hold and go somewhere else and come back, and then you got to explain yourself again. Meanwhile, your whole day is spent on just trying to get a question answered.
So let me ask you this. Can the absolute opposite effect happen?
Yes. I don't know why not.
I was traveling. I had done 3 days of training in Augusta, Georgia.
Okay.
And I drove across I-20, heading towards Atlanta. I stopped and had dinner with some friends. I finally got to my hotel at about 11 o'clock at night, 10:30. I'm exhausted. I have to start a 2-day workshop the next day, and I check into the hotel, and I'm greeted by a young lady there. And she says, "Good evening. Welcome to the Atlanta Northwest Marriott." And I says, "Hi." I mean, personally, she was a little perky even for me at 10:30 at night. But I was very taken aback by how polite she was, how professional. And we chatted for a few minutes. And she says, "Mr. Gregory, do you need anything else?" I said, "I need directions to the Galleria Center." She hand wrote the directions down. She gives them to me. "Do you need a wake-up call?" She's asking me about a wake-up call even before I go up to bed.
She needs a raise.
And so I'm talking to her, and I start to use her name. She had a name tag on that said Alex, and I'm assuming it was hers because sometimes people forget it and they have to wear a badge. But it was hers, so her name was Alex. And I said, "Alex," I said, "no," I said, "I just got the directions. I'll check on everything a little bit later on. I'll talk to you tomorrow." "No problem, Mr. Gregory. You take care. Have a wonderful night." Now, and the level of service, that's just phenomenal.
It is.
I got upstairs, and I'm exhausted. I picked up the phone and called my wife to let her know I was safe in my hotel the next night. And she answers the phone like this: "I'm on the phone to Nancy. I'll call you back. Click." I call that lousy customer service.
For granted, don't we, as marriage?
Well, that, and then, but she called back about 5 minutes later, and she said that Hollywood was sick. Now, Hollywood's our dog, and we believe in butts and rescue mutts. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So Hollywood's a purebred mutt. He's a Keithhound, Elkhound, Shepherd, Lab, Wolf, Akita, Spitz, Chow, whatever else I could figure out.
My goodness.
And so I said, "What's wrong?" She said, "He's breathing funny." Now, it's about 11:15 at night at this point. So she says, "I'm going to take him to the emergency room vet." She calls me when she gets there at about 12 o'clock. She said they want to run tests on him. She calls me back later and said his blood cell count is down. They want to keep him overnight and hydrate him. She says, "I need to get," she says, "I don't know how to get hold of our vet." I said, "I'll take care of all that. I know our vet's number by heart, everything." So it's about 1 o'clock in the morning, and she goes home. Now, my wife and I have been married for 30 years almost, and we don't have any children. So our pets are our children.
They're very special to you. Yes.
And so I'm not sleeping too well that night. Oh. So it's about 1:30, 1:45, and I'm drifting off to sleep, and somewhere around 4:15, and I know the time because the phone rang obnoxiously. And I looked at the clock, and I answered the phone. It was the hotel phone. It wasn't my cell. I answered the hotel phone. "Hello." My wife on the other end. She said, "Are you sleeping?"
"No, not now."
And that's kind of what I was thinking. I says, "No." And she says, "Me either."
Oh.
She says, "The vet just called. Hollywood just died."
Oh.
And I lost
it. She needed you, even though you...
Oh, yeah. But she also needed me. I needed her. Because I was so worried of what was going on. Oh. So she and I talked for a few minutes, and the last thing she said to me that night was, "Are you okay to teach a class in the morning?" Mm-hmm. And I said, "I have to be."
I would have said the same thing. That's what a professional does.
Because they're expecting level 5 from me, service.
That's right. That's right.
So we hung up the phone. I got dressed. I'm not going back to sleep now. It's about 4:45. I got dressed, put on a sweatpants or whatever I had with me, and went downstairs, went outside. And I'm outside in the parking lot of the Marriott Hotel in Northwest Atlanta, and I just screamed.
Oh.
And I came back inside, and I went to the gym, and I got on the treadmill, and I did 2 miles. Yeah,
breaking my heart, Greg.
And I hardly ever do treadmills. I don't exercise a lot. I need to.
But it does release stress.
Absolutely. So I go back upstairs. I pack my stuff up. I get ready to go downstairs. I have to get myself into the right frame of mind. As I go downstairs, I realized I left the directions that Alex had written down the night before to where I had to go in the room. And I just did not want to go back to that room. At that point, that room was just giving me, bed juju, I just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So I went to the front desk, and there's Alex. I didn't even recognize her. I'm just walking to the front desk in a whole different mindset than I was the night before.
Yes.
And Alex was there, and she says, "Mr. Gregory." Mr. Gregory, are you okay? And I stood at the front desk at the counter at the Marriott. I could barely breathe. I couldn't speak. And finally the words came out, my dog died last night. And all the emotions came out, and I started to cry uncontrollably at the front desk.
I love a man who can cry.
It was about 7 a.m., and I'm crying. Now, Alex got off at 11. She went home and came back and pulled a short double shift. She was back in by 6:45 that morning.
Wow.
And she took my hand, held onto my hand, said, "It's okay, Mr. Gregory. You're strong. You'll get through this. I know you will." I stood there crying. And I said, "Alex, I left the directions upstairs." She says, "I remember you're going to the Galleria Center here. Let me go write them down again." She goes over, she writes them down. She comes back, she takes my hands and holds them very tightly. And she said, "Mr. Gregory, go do what you need to do." And she pulled my hands to her lips and gave my hands, back of my hands, a little kiss and says, "You'll get through today." And then she pushed me away.
She seems like a high I to me.
Alex is so wonderful.
Really,
yeah, she's a very strong IS. There's no doubt about that.
That's
so
just mine.
I go over, I do the program that day. I got through the day. I don't remember the day. I was on autopilot.
Sure.
I get back to the hotel, just crying, just absolutely exhausted. I get upstairs. I don't remember the drive. I don't remember anything about the day until I put the key in the door in my room on the 15th floor of that hotel, opened the door back to the right. And as I walked in, on the foot of the bed, I could see an envelope. Like, what? Walked over, dropped my stuff down, opened up the envelope, and inside the envelope was a card signed by 9 people with the Marriott Hotel.
Wow.
Condolences. Alex simply said, "Mr. Gregory, I know how strong you are. You'll get through this." And the GM of the hotel and the front desk manager, I couldn't even read his signature, simply says, "We want to let you know the entire Marriott Hotel share in your pain." I sat on the foot of that bed crying.
Well, you know, this is such a great story, Greg, because it tells me a little bit even who you are. And now you're letting God knows many people that will view this on YouTube. Mm-hmm. And they need to hear this. I had a similar story. I'm going to make mine really short. But my brother died at the age of 42, and I had to do a seminar 2 days later, and I was devastated and went and did the seminar, and I didn't say anything until the end, at the end of which I said, "My brother Larry died 2 days ago. He was my best friend." I said, "I came here today because I said I would come here today and give you my all. So I hope I have." And I got a standing ovation.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people have these things happen to them, but they can't talk about it. They can't cry about it. Good for you for having this kind of feeling.
Well, and that's so critical that we have to be open. We have to be vulnerable. We have to let ourselves out there. And I believe teams have to let themselves out there. But I want to go back to your question. Your question was about the impact that a good team can have.
Yes.
That team, spearheaded by Alex, who, by the way, normally did not work front desk. Her normal job in the hotel was working banquets, but they were short-staffed, so they put her into that slot that day.
Sometimes it's meant to be.
Oh, it absolutely is. It absolutely is. It's a God wink, as I like to say.
Yeah.
And so that day changed everything. And I've told the story thousands of times. You can actually find the YouTube video and watch a keynote speech in Atlanta where Alex comes up on stage.
Wow.
And what's interesting is the impact that she has had. Now, that story occurred over 12 years ago, and it still touches my heart every day.
You can never forget something like
No.
that.
And when I travel, about 90% of the time, I will choose to stay in a Marriott-owned property.
Yes.
Further away, pay more because of what one person did one time over a decade ago.
One person can make a difference in your life.
Mr. Marriott loved the story. He shared it.
Story.
Mr. Marriott shared the video and shared the story with his GMs around the world.
Well, he did the right thing because he taught a lot of people a lot of things.
The San Diego Marina Marriott Marquis uses the video of me telling that story in a keynote to their front desk new hires as part of their onboarding training.
Well, send me that video. I have over 500,000 followers on Twitter.
Okay.
I think it needs to be seen. I have 7,000, I think, on Google+. I can get it out there. I think people need to see that.
Absolutely. It's so true. It's that. And last year I checked in at the Marriott in San Diego because if I'm in San Diego, I'm going to stay at this hotel because they're beautiful people. I didn't know they were using the video at that time. So a young lady at the counter is talking to me, and she says, "You look familiar, Mr. Gregory." And she goes, "Oh, my God, the video." I went, "Huh?" She says, "The story about your dog that night in a Marriott hotel." I went, "Yeah." She says, "That's part of our training." And here's the power part. Okay, this is where I said it impacts everybody. Ashley in San Diego, California, who saw a story that Alex did in Atlanta, Georgia, a decade earlier, said to me, "I realized after I watched that video, I wanted to be like her."
Wow.
Don't tell me that one person cannot impact an entire organization.
I know they can. I've seen it happen.
It's called the Alex effect right now.
Yeah, that's good. That's a great tribute to her, which is what every employee should be.
Yeah. Now, jump forward a few weeks ago, I happened to have been in Atlanta, and I contacted Alex, and I had a chance to have dinner with her and her husband and her 3 kids. It was the most wonderful night I've had in years because of her.
That's wonderful.
So,
well, this has been very informational, Greg, and I'm sure our listeners will want to listen to this interview and glean a lot of knowledge and the disclosure of what your experience of losing your dog is. Thank you so much for being our guest today on ImageMaker Inc.
Not a problem. I'm glad to be here, Dr. Joyce, and hope your listeners get a lot out of this. I know a lot of your interviews have been very powerful and inspirational and very helpful.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.